Hello, my listeners. Welcome to the first episode of my podcast, I Eat the Word of God. So here's a little about myself, a little bit. My name is Nancy Zhou, spelled as Z-H-O-U. It's not Zhao, it's not Zoo, but it's Zhou. I am 26 years old. Sometimes people think I look like 19. Some people think I'm 35, but I'm 26 years old. I'm just a random girl in her 20s seeking God and seeking His words and seeking His truth. And I've had quite of an interesting experience with the Lord growing up because I never knew Him until the age of 14. And I have turned away from Him for a certain amount of time when I was in college. But upon graduation, I wanted to seek Him again, and that's how I started my relationship with Him from scratch, and that's when I started reading the Bible. So I'm just someone who is studying His words, who's learning. I'm still growing. I may not know everything about the Bible, so I want you guys to be eyewitness of, my journey with the Lord. And you can not only share this journey with me, and you can also have your personal journey with the Lord. I'm going to start my podcast with Esther. And the reason why I picked Esther is because, first of all, she's a queen. As a girl in her 20s, when I'm navigating my life in all different aspects, I think having Esther in the back of my mind and knowing what she goes through and what she does for her people as a queen in a world that's so far away from God, it's a great example, is a great role model for me as a woman, because we're pretty far away from God. Sometimes our life can be really far away from the Lord, and how each one of us can still live a life for Him, according to His will in this crooked generation. I like to read my Bible with the NASB version just because it's a word-to-word translation. And some of you may like reading it with ESV or NIV, New International Version, but it's all good. I think we should be able to read different versions, King James, New King James. Just, having so many different translations can help us understand exactly what the verse is about. And that's something so great about being a Christian, is that we have so many different versions of the Bible. It's not necessarily about, people translating it in different ways, but it's more about just having so many different translations gives us, to look at the picture, look at the greater picture easily. Like instead of touching an elephant, just the foot, I have another version that's touching the elephant where the ear is at, or how the elephant's eye looks like. So I will be able to get a greater picture of exactly what an elephant looks like with different angles and different perspectives. So I think the same thing applies to the different translations that we have in the Bible. And for this episode, I'm going to be reading from the NASB version. Now it happened in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Kush over 127 provinces. In those days, as King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne, which was at the citadel of Susa. In the 3rd year of his reign, he held a banquet for all his officials and attendants, army officers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the officials of his provinces in his presence. At that time, he displayed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor of his great majesty for many days, 180 days. These days were finished. The king held a banquet lasting 7 days for all the people who were present at the citadel in Susa, from the greatest to the least. In the courtyard of the garden of the king's palace, there were curtains of fine white and violet linen held by cords of fine purple linen on silver rings and marble columns, and couches of gold and silver on a mosaic floor of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and mineral stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels of various kinds, and the royal wine was plentiful in proportion to the king's bounty. The drinking was done according to the royal law, there was no compulsion, for so the king had given orders to each official of his household, that he was to do as each person pleased. Queen Vashti also held a banquet for the women in the palace which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was cheerful with wine, he ordered Mehuman, Bitha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, and 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal turban in order to display her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's order delivered by the eunuchs. So the king became very angry, and his wrath burned within him. Then the king said to the wise man who understood the times, for it was the custom of the king to speak this way before all who knew Persian law and justice and were close to him, namely Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 officials of Persia and Media who had access to the king's presence and sat in the first place in the kingdom, according to the law, what is to be done with Queen Vashti, since she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus delivered by the eunuchs. And in the presence of the king and the other officials, Memucan said, Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but also all the officials and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, so as to make their own husband despicable in their sight, when they say, King Ahasuerus commanded that Queen Vashti be brought in to his presence, but she did not come. And this day the wives of the officials of Persia and Media who have heard about the queen's conduct will talk about it to all the king's officials, and there will be plenty of attempt and anger. If it pleases the king, let a royal edict be issued by him, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media so that it cannot be replaced, that Vashti may not come into the presence of King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is more worthy than she. When the king's edict which he will make is heard throughout his kingdom, great as it is, then all women will give honor to their husbands, great and small. Now this word pleased the king and the officials, and the king did as Memucan proposed. So he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province according to its script, and to every people according to their language, that every man was to be the ruler in his own house, and the one who speaks in the language of his own people. And I'd love for you guys to join me tomorrow to read the 2nd chapter.